You're listening to CRV Ambreed's Better Herd podcast, brought to you in partnership with the New Zealand Dairy Exporter. Join us as we talk to CRV Ambreed experts, industry leaders and farmers about hot topics and issues affecting herd improvement in New Zealand's dairy industry today. Keep current with industry news and get practical tips for improving the health and efficiency of your herd.
Welcome today as we talk about ear tags and animal identification. So Nait is New Zealand's animal identification and tracing system for cattle and deer, and it's managed by OSPRI on behalf of our primary industries and the government. Today I'm joined by OSPRI's Head of Traceability, Kevin Forward, and Nicholas Crosse, FarmIQ's Customer Experience Manager, to chat about some upcoming changes to the Nait system and what this means for farmers. Welcome to you both, Kevin and Nicholas.
Thank you.
So let's talk about a farmer's legal obligation for tagging and registering Nait animals. Kevin, can you refresh our memory about a farmer's key obligations?
Yep. So under the Act, we refer to them as the person in charge of the animal. That's the person who's in day-to-day care of the animals, or a picker. They're required to tag and register an animal within 180 days of birth or before first movement off farm, whichever comes first. Or if they detect that the tag has been lost, they're required to re-tag the animal and register the animal within 7 days or before that first movement off farm, whichever comes first.
So how good are we as an industry at complying to these regulations?
As a dairy industry, the particular measure we're looking at is the fail to register events. Just over 80% of farmers are meeting that obligation where their animals are registered appropriately before that first movement off farm. And that's really the key metric that we're looking at the moment. It's the one where you're seeing a lot of infringements and prosecutions coming out by MPI.
So in late 2019, I understand the fine for Nait offences increased to $400 per animal. So what sort of examples of errors are farmers actually making to get these fines?
Looking at the 2020 year-to-date stats released by MPI, and there's been just over 1,000 infringement notices issued. 994 of those went to fail to register Nait animals. And there's a reason behind that is because that's been our focus for the campaign. The two key focus areas are making sure your Nait location is re-registered, so you've identified all of those LINZ land parcels, and failing to tag and register animals. That's been our two compliance focus areas for the last 18 months. So that's why you're seeing such a high number in that area.
Is fining farmers providing an effective way to improve compliance?
I hate to say it, but yes, it is. When we started this campaign, which was around May in 2018, we sent out what was called a Nait nudge. It looked a bit like a postcard, and we sent those to every farmer who had failed to register animals in the previous year. We saw a small increase in compliance, so we saw a small behavioural change. And over 3 months, that very quickly dropped back down to what it was before. So when we looked 2018, only 52% of farmers actually registered their animals prior to movement off farm. We then started the combined compliance enforcement strategy with MPI, and that started off with infringements and prosecutions. It's now evolved where there's also warning letters going out. What we have now is greater than 80% compliance nationally, and that's fantastic. But what we've seen is that it's actually sustained. So we've seen the compliance regime has actually resulted in a sustained behavioural change. Farmers are actually starting to understand the importance of registering their animals.
Yeah, as much as we don't like fines, sometimes they have a reason behind it. And I suppose as long as it's creating the right change behaviour, that's important, isn't it?
Yep, that's exactly what we're after.
So we understand that there are changes effective this month regarding the use of Nait tags. Can you tell us what is changing and give us some background as to why these changes are needed?
So when we did the amendments to the Nait Act, that came into force, I think it was about 14 December last year, there was one final amendment which was a recommendation out of the Nait review, and that was for tags to be fixed to location. The Nait review, and it was demonstrated within Bovis, found that because of issues around compliance, when you had a disease incursion, there was difficulty in identifying the original source of some animals. And looking at international best practice, they identified one strategy to mitigate this was to ensure that tags were only used on animals at the location that those tags were registered at. And that's the recommendation that came out of the Nait review. That went through the public consultation process and select committee and came through now as an amendment to the Act. That amendment says that you can only use a prescribed Nait device at a location that it's registered to, and that comes into force in December this year. What does that mean for farmers, or what does it mean particularly for dairy industry? We did negotiate a bit of common sense around the way that we implement that. Most dairy farmers will have a visual ID printed on their tag that is the animal's birth ID. It will have the participant code, the year, and the sequence number. It doesn't have the Nait location ID printed on it. So for dairy farmers who have a tag with a participant code, they need to ensure that they're using it at the location it's registered to. But if you move location or that animal's at a grazier, you can call up the Nait contact centre and ask for that tag to be reassigned to the new Nait location. And the reason we've allowed that is because the Nait location ID is not actually printed on the tag. If you have a tag with a Nait location ID printed on it, it can only be used at that location. It can't be used anywhere else. And that's to ensure that, say that animal was not registered correctly, that in the event of a disease outbreak, we can at least track it back to its source of origin. We know the farm that it's come from in the first place. And then we can try and fill in the gaps in between.
So to make it clear in my head, you pretty much are saying that we don't need to throw out existing tags if we're moving stock to a different location. It all comes down to what's printed on that tag. And as long as we work with Nait to reallocate those tags, then we're going to be okay?
Yep. So obviously the main group that affects is our share milkers who move around movement day. If they've got unused tags, what we're encouraging them to do is when they call OSPRI to set up their new Nait location ID, set up any TB testing changes that need to be put in place, we'll also ask and check to make sure, okay, if you've got any unused Nait tags at your current location, we'll transfer them over to your new Nait location for you. If you're not having to call OSPRI for any one of those reasons, actually make sure you call them to get any unused tags reassigned.
So dairy farmers need to allocate an information provider to their Nait account. Once that's set up, is there any need for a farmer to visit their Nait account, or can the data all be managed via their herd recording platform?
I would love to say that there was no need, but what we're dealing with is some legacy information systems. So what I am strongly encouraging all users of Nait, all parties to the scheme, is that they regularly check their Nait account to make sure that it aligns with what their third-party software is telling them. The reason we're saying that is that we have identified that there are some data integration issues with all third-party software. And it's just by the design of the systems. The Nait information system was designed for information to come in. It wasn't designed to send information back to a third-party software platform. So those are some of the things that our technical teams are looking at as they redevelop or develop the new OSPRI portal. In the meantime, it's really important for pickers to understand that their legal obligations are what's in Nait. You may think that you're meeting all of your legal obligations in your third-party software, but it's actually what is in Nait that is important. And it's important because that's where we go to do our tracing. It's where MPI disease managers have got access to all of that information. That's where we do our contact tracing, the same as Ministry of Health does using COVID Act. So really important to make sure that information is up to date and accurate. So we strongly encourage people to go and check on that occasionally and just make sure that your movements are correct, that the animal list is correct, and that everything's going through smoothly.
So if in doubt, my Nait account is the number one source of truth, right?
Yes, it is. That is your number one source of truth. And it's the one that's really critical for a disease incursion.
And so if I'm a bit stuck, who do I contact?
If it's to do with myHERD or your CRV Ambreed platform, then obviously CRV Ambreed is the people you give them a call. If it's issues with your actual Nait account, then you give OSPRI a call on our 0800 number, which is 0800 482 463. Customer service staff are there to assist. If you have any problems, if you're not sure about what your obligations are or you've got concerns about whether you're meeting any of the legal requirements, please give us a call. It's really important you do that because, one, we can help you get across any issues, but we can also document in our customer relationship management system that we're actually working with you to assist to get anything corrected. If you were then to pop up on one of our infringement watch lists, then MPI would be able to look at that and say, oh, well, that person's actually working with OSPRI to get that resolved. So we'll just keep a watching wait.
And I think that's probably a very important point, is as long as you're trying to do the best by your data and get those things corrected, then that's the best place to be in, right?
Yep, we're there to help, and it's really important, that people not be afraid or think, oh, gee, I don't want to call them because I might get in trouble. We're not there to get people in trouble. We're there to help make sure that their data is accurate, make sure that they're ready and prepared for the next biosecurity incursion that might happen. And I think that's really important to remember. This isn't about a compliance regulation scheme. This is actually about preparing farmers for the next biosecurity incursion that New Zealand's going to face. It's about protecting your livelihood. It's about protecting the industry. It's about protecting New Zealand's economy.
Talking about data, I'd like to welcome Nicholas from FarmIQ. How long has FarmIQ been working with Nait?
Probably, I'm trying to find the exact date for this conversation. It was probably the better part of the last 10 years we've existed. So the FarmIQ platform was all built around the individual recording of animals and understanding how it can work with both the EIDs for animals, growth weights and everything, but also their traceability and talking with the Nait. So it's enabled a platform for farmers to be their information provider and be their platform, so that they are recording movements on and off farm, recording births. That information can be fed through to Nait. As Kevin mentioned there, the Nait of the website is obviously the source of truth, but we are an information provider of theirs for quite a while now, and we do what we can to help our wider industry partners like the myHERD system, Synlait, Pāmu, likes of them all help keep up with their Nait recording obligations.
So when dairy farmers herd record with, say, myHERD, can you explain the process for the tags to be registered with Nait?
Yes, so that's quite a relatively simple process. There is basically 2 steps. So to keep it nice and simple, whenever a farmer does sign up to myHERD, they do get an individualised coaching call and setup to make sure they are explaining this process. And basically the 2 steps are within the myHERD system, they do just need to go in and enter their Nait number, validate that they are the peaker on farm and that they want FarmIQ and therefore the myHERD platform to be their information provider. And then what also must happen is they must just contact Nait, either through their own account or give them a call and email and say that they would like FarmIQ Systems Limited to be their registered information provider.
So with the amendments with Nait, the tags are signed for use at a single location. Does that require any additional action by myHERD users?
No, so there will be no additional action required to that. So what myHERD has is what we refer to as a tag cupboard. So that tag cupboard is basically where all tags you purchased are allocated. So to put in simple terms, it is an electronic cupboard where all your birth ID, EID, VID tags are stored. So this is automatically loaded into your myHERD system whenever you purchase these tags through CRV. So as you're buying them, they'll all come and they're all linked up. That way, what you can do when recording any events like a birth, you have a pre-populated list of tags which will be free to allocate to those animals. This list of free tags should match exactly what is inside your physical cupboard bucket to be used. That way you're ensuring that that tag, that birth ID, that code is registered to your location for you to actually be able to use it.
That sounds way too easy. I love it. So, CRV's confident that myHERD, which is built on the FarmIQ platform, we're confident that it meets OSPRI's Nait requirements. But Kevin, do you have any comments on the FarmIQ Nait data transfer process?
What I'd like to say is FarmIQ have been really actively engaged with OSPRI, as you've heard Nicholas say, for a long period of time. Everybody be aware that we have identified issues with third-party data transfer, but I just want to give confidence to everybody that OSPRI has been working with all third-party software providers, including FarmIQ, to ensure that that transfer of data is happening effectively and efficiently. We've also been working our IT team very closely with FarmIQ and CVAmbri to ensure that any future changes to the system will meet Nait's third-party software accreditation requirements, which will come out early next year. So I think, farmers can have confidence in that we're all working collectively together to ensure the smooth transfer of the information between systems. But I would just say you do need to just keep checking on your Nait account to make sure that it is going through. And if there are any issues, then just give the appropriate people a call, whether it's CRVAmbri or our Nait contact centre, and we'll get those issues sorted out for you.
Thank you, Kevin. Getting your head around the accurate and timely tagging of animals can be a minefield, but it's up to all of us to get it right. those managing Nait need to ensure they have a system that reflects not only best practice, but is also real on-farm practical. As a herd recording provider, it's our job to make it as easy as possible to manage, and working with platforms like FarmIQ helps us achieve that. As a dairy farmer in New Zealand, it's up to you to ensure you are up to date with changes in legislation. I'd like to thank both Kevin and Nicholas for joining me today, and all the best with your Nait changes.
Thank you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to CRV Ambreed's Better Herd podcast. Read more about today's topic and our panel guests by visiting CRV Ambreed's website, www.crv4all, that's the number 4all.co.nz, or follow us on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. Check out our upcoming topics and join us again soon for your Better Herd fix.